In the heart of a sprawling galaxy, where stars shimmered like scattered diamonds across an endless void, there stood a royal palace unlike any other. This was no ordinary structure. It floated amidst nebulae and orbiting moons, its crystalline spires refracting light into dazzling rainbows that painted the surrounding space with hues unimaginable to human eyes. The palace belonged to Princess Xylora, sovereign of the planet Valith, home to one of the most advanced civilizations in the universe. Her beauty was legendary, not just among her people but throughout countless star systems. With skin that glimmered faintly as though kissed by stardust and hair cascading down her back in silken waves of deep violet, she exuded grace and power. Xylora had spent centuries ruling wisely over her realm, balancing diplomacy with innovation while maintaining peace through alliances forged with neighboring worlds. Yet for all her poise and strength, she harbored a secret longing, a curiosity about Earth, a distant blue-green orb teeming with life forms so different from her own. Tales of humanity's resilience fascinated her, their emotions raw and unfiltered, their capacity for both destruction and creation unparalleled. She often found herself gazing at holographic projections of Earth's landscapes, oceans crashing against cliffs, forests alive with vibrant greens, cities glowing under neon lights. It intrigued her how such fragile beings could thrive despite their limitations. On this particular day, however, Xylora wasn't alone in her chambers. Standing before her was Captain Rylan Doran, a soldier hailing from Earth who had been sent on a diplomatic mission following a recent trade agreement between Valith and several human colonies. Unlike the sleek uniforms worn by Valithian guards, Rylan wore plain fatigues adorned only with insignias marking his rank. His dark hair was cropped short, his jawline sharp, and his eyes carried the weary wisdom of someone who'd seen too much war yet still held on to hope. He wasn't tall by alien standards but carried himself with quiet confidence, his presence commanding respect even within these opulent halls. Rylan had arrived 2 weeks prior, tasked with ensuring the terms of the treaty were honored. But what started as formal meetings quickly turned into something more personal when he and Xylora began exchanging ideas during late-night discussions. They talked about everything: culture, politics, philosophy, and discovered they shared a mutual fascination for each other's worlds. For Xylora, it was refreshing to engage with someone whose perspective differed so greatly from hers. For Rylan, conversing with an alien princess challenged him to think beyond the confines of his military training. As fate would have it, today marked another meeting between them, though neither expected it to unfold quite as it did. When Rylan entered the grand hall where Xylora awaited, he paused briefly, taking in the sight of her standing near the translucent windows overlooking the cosmic expanse. She looked every bit regal, her flowing gown shimmering softly in the ambient light. Clearing his throat, he approached with a grin, unable to resist teasing her as he always did. "Hey babe," he said, his tone light and playful, knowing full well how much it amused, and sometimes flustered her. Xylora turned sharply, her cheeks flushing a delicate shade of lavender. "You dare address me so informally again?" she retorted, though the corners of her mouth twitched upward despite her attempt at sternness. "Yes, baby," Rylan replied without missing a beat, chuckling at the way her blush deepened. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, caught somewhere between amusement and irritation. Then, unexpectedly, Xylora burst out laughing, the sound echoing melodically through the chamber. Rylan joined in, shaking his head as if marveling at how easily she disarmed him. Their banter felt natural now, almost comfortable, though neither acknowledged the growing connection simmering beneath their words. Unbeknownst to them, however, this light-hearted exchange would soon take a dramatic turn. As laughter subsided, a sudden tremor rippled through the palace, causing the floating structure to sway slightly. Alarms blared, red warning lights flashing across the walls. Guards rushed past, shouting orders in their native tongue. Xylora immediately straightened, her demeanor shifting from playful to authoritative in an instant. "What is happening?" Rylan asked, instinctively moving closer to her. "A breach," Xylora replied tersely, already striding toward the main control room. "We must secure the core reactor." Without hesitation, Rylan fell into step beside her, his years of combat training kicking in. Whatever humor had existed moments ago vanished, replaced by urgency. Together, they navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the palace, dodging falling debris as the tremors intensified. Along the way, Xylora barked commands to her guards via a wrist communicator, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. When they reached the reactor chamber, they found it swarming with intruders, Human mercenaries clad in black tactical gear, their faces obscured by helmets. At first glance, it seemed impossible. Humans shouldn't have known the location of Valeth, let alone breached its defenses. Yet here they were, wreaking havoc in pursuit of something or someone. "Stay behind me," Rylan ordered, stepping protectively in front of Xylora. She bristled at the command but didn't argue, understanding the gravity of the situation. One of the mercenaries spotted them and raised a weapon. Without thinking, Rylan lunged forward, tackling the man to the ground. A flurry of punches followed, the metallic clang of fists hitting armor reverberating through the chamber. Xylora watched in awe as Rylan fought with precision and ferocity. His movements fluid and calculated. Despite being outnumbered, he managed to hold his own, buying precious time for reinforcements to arrive. But the mercenaries weren't ordinary soldiers. They were equipped with advanced technology stolen from rival factions. One of them activated a device that emitted a high-pitched frequency, causing Rylan to stumble backward, clutching his ears in pain. Xylora acted swiftly, using her telekinetic abilities to hurl debris at the attackers, forcing them to retreat momentarily. "Are you all right?" she asked, helping Rylan regain his footing. "I'll live," he muttered, though blood trickled from one corner of his mouth. "But we need to end this now." Before either could formulate a plan, a figure emerged from the shadows, a human woman with piercing green eyes and an air of cold calculation. She introduced herself as Commander Lyra Vance, leader of the rogue faction responsible for the attack. Her motives remained unclear, though her gaze lingered unervingly on Xylora. "You've interfered for the last time," Lyra declared, leveling her weapon at the princess. Rylan stepped forward once more, shielding Xylora with his body. "If you want her, you'll have to go through me." Lyra smirked, clearly amused by his bravado. "So be it." The standoff escalated rapidly, weapons firing and energy blasts ricocheting off the walls. Amidst the chaos, Xylora realized she couldn't rely solely on Rylan's protection. Summoning every ounce of courage, she unleashed her powers in ways she'd never dared before, creating barriers of pure energy to deflect attacks and trap the mercenaries in place. Together, she and Rylan formed an unlikely team, their strengths complementing each other perfectly. Yet even as they gained the upper hand, questions lingered in Xylora's mind. Why had these humans targeted her specifically? What did they hope to gain? And why did Lyra seem so fixated on her? The answers eluded her, for now, but one thing became abundantly clear. This encounter was far from over. As the skirmish drew to a close, with the remaining mercenaries either captured or forced to flee, Xylora and Rylan found themselves standing amidst the wreckage of the reactor chamber. Smoke curled lazily from damaged equipment, and the faint hum of emergency systems filled the silence. Xylora leaned against a console, catching her breath, while Rylan inspected a cut on his arm, wincing slightly as he applied pressure to staunch the bleeding. Despite the adrenaline coursing through them, exhaustion began to settle in, leaving both physically drained yet emotionally charged. "You're insane, you know that?" Xylora finally broke the silence, her voice tinged with exasperation but also unmistakable admiration. "Running headfirst into danger like that, it's reckless." Rylan glanced up, smirking despite the sting in his wound. "Coming from the woman who just single-handedly took down half their squad? I think reckless is relative." She rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a small smile. There was something oddly comforting about his sarcasm, even in the aftermath of such chaos. Still, her expression sobered as reality set in. "This isn't over," she murmured, her gaze drifting toward the scorched walls. "They came prepared. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they weren't after the reactor." "Then what were they after?" Rylan asked, straightening up and tossing aside a scrap of fabric he'd used to staunch the blood flow. His tone was calm, but his eyes betrayed the tension simmering beneath the surface. He knew better than anyone how dangerous mercenaries could be, especially ones backed by shadowy organizations. Xylora hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of the console absent-mindedly. "Me," she admitted quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Commander Vance." She made that clear. "But why? What use could I possibly be to them?" Rylan frowned, his mind racing through possibilities. Blackmail? Political leverage? Or maybe... He stopped abruptly, his eyes narrowing as a thought struck him. "Wait, did they mention anything specific? Any demands?" She shook her head. "Nothing concrete, just threats. She kept saying I'd interfered enough." Xylora crossed her arms tightly over her chest, frustration bubbling beneath her composed exterior. It makes no sense. We haven't crossed paths with human factions outside of trade agreements. Unless, her voice trailed off, her brow furrowing in contemplation. Unless what? Rylan pressed gently, sensing she was piecing something together. Unless this has something to do with my research, she said slowly, almost reluctantly. I've been working on a project classified even among my advisors. It involves harnessing quantum energy fields to create sustainable power sources. If someone got wind of it, Rylan's jaw tightened. Quantum energy wasn't just theoretical jargon. It represented untold potential for both creation and destruction. In the wrong hands, it could destabilize entire planets, or worse. And you think these mercenaries are trying to steal your work? It's possible, Xylora replied, her voice heavy with unease. But there's more. Lyra mentioned something else before you intervened, something about legacy. She said my interference threatened to unravel centuries of planning. Planning? Rylan echoed, his frown deepening. What kind of planning? That's what I don't understand. Xylora sighed, running a hand through her shimmering hair. It doesn't add up. My ancestors were explorers, not conquerors. Our history is built on cooperation, not domination. So why would anyone frame us as a threat? Before Rylan could respond, a soft chime interrupted their conversation. A holographic interface flickered to life above the console, displaying a message from the palace's central AI system. It was an incoming transmission, but not from within Valeth. The origin coordinates pointed to a remote sector of space, heavily encrypted and flagged as unauthorized. Do you recognize this? Xylora asked, gesturing toward the data stream. Rylan studied the flashing markers, his instincts screaming caution. No, but whoever it is, they're broadcasting directly into our network. That's bold or desperate. Or both, Xylora muttered, tapping a sequence of commands to decrypt the signal. The screen flickered again, resolving into a grainy image of a face partially obscured by shadows. It was humanoid, but not entirely human, the features distorted, as though filtered through layers of static. Greetings, Your Highness, the figure rasped, its voice modulated to sound mechanical yet menacing. I trust my associates paid you a visit earlier. Consider it a courtesy call, a reminder of what's at stake. Xylora stiffened, her grip tightening on the console. Who are you? What do you want? The figure chuckled darkly, the sound sending shivers down Rylan's spine. Answers will come in due time. For now, suffice it to say that your experiments tread dangerous ground. Cease your work, or face the consequences. And if I refuse? Xylora shot back, her voice steady despite the fury building inside her. Then you leave us no choice but to escalate, the figure replied coolly. Your friend here, its gaze shifted briefly to Rylan, is proof enough of our resolve. Do not test us further. With that, the transmission cut off, plunging the room back into uneasy silence. Xylora turned to Rylan, her expression grim. This changes everything. He nodded, his earlier injuries forgotten in the face of this new threat. Agreed. Whoever they are, they're organized and they've been watching us closely. Which means we can't trust anyone. Not even your own counsel. Her lips pressed into a thin line, acknowledging the truth in his words. Then we'll have to act alone. But first, we need to find out who's pulling the strings, and why they consider me such a liability. As they exchanged determined glances, neither noticed the faint blinking light embedded in the wall, a hidden surveillance drone recording their every move. Somewhere far away, Commander Lyra Vance watched the footage with a satisfied smirk, her plans falling neatly into place. The next morning brought little relief. Though the immediate threat had been neutralized, the weight of uncertainty hung heavily over the palace. Xylora convened an emergency session with her inner circle, presenting only sanitized details of the attack while omitting the mysterious transmission. Trust, once a cornerstone of her reign, now felt precarious. Even her closest advisors seemed distant, their loyalty clouded by fear and suspicion. Meanwhile, Rylan spent hours poring over maps of the palace's security systems, searching for vulnerabilities that might explain how the mercenaries infiltrated undetected. He collaborated with a handful of trusted Valethian engineers, their combined expertise yielding troubling discoveries. Hidden breaches in the network suggested the intruders hadn't acted alone. Someone within the palace had aided them, feeding information from the inside. As days passed, the strain began to show. Sleepless nights left Xylora irritable, snapping at servants and second-guessing decisions she'd once made effortlessly. Rylan, too, grew restless, haunted by memories of battles long past and the gnawing feeling that history was repeating itself. Their dynamic shifted subtly. The playful teasing gave way to terse exchanges, each focused singularly on survival rather than camaraderie. Yet amidst the mounting tension, moments of vulnerability surfaced. Late one evening, as Xylora wandered the gardens seeking solace, she found Rylan perched on a bench overlooking a luminous pond. His boots rested on the damp grass, his posture slouched in a rare display of weariness. "You shouldn't be out here," she said softly, approaching cautiously. "It's not safe." He glanced up, offering a weak smile. "Neither are the halls. At least out here, I can breathe." She hesitated, then sat beside him, her gown pooling elegantly around her ankles. For a while, neither spoke, content to listen to the gentle hum of nocturnal insects and the occasional ripple in the water. Finally, Xylora broke the silence. "I never thanked you," she said, her voice barely audible, "for protecting me." Rylan shrugged, staring at the reflection of the twin moons dancing across the pond. "It's my job." "It's more than that," she countered, turning to meet his gaze. "You risked your life for me, again and again." "Why?" He met her eyes, his expression softening. "Because you matter, not just to your people but to, well, to me." The admission hung between them, unspoken yet undeniable. Xylora felt her cheeks warm, though whether from embarrassment or something deeper, she couldn't say. She looked away, focusing on the ripples in the water as if they might provide clarity. "We're running out of time," she murmured after a pause. "Every lead we chase ends in dead ends. Every clue points to betrayal within my own court. And still, we don't know who's truly behind this." Rylan nodded grimly. "That's how they want it, to keep us guessing, to wear us down. But we can't let them win." "No," she agreed, her resolve hardening. "We won't." Their conversation tapered off, replaced by a shared understanding. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. As they rose to return to the palace, Rylan extended a hand, steadying Xylora as she navigated uneven terrain. For a fleeting moment, their fingers lingered, warmth passing between them like a spark igniting in the darkness. Back inside, preparations continued. Security measures tightened, scanners swept for additional drones, and encrypted communications channels were established to safeguard sensitive discussions. But lurking beneath the surface of these practical efforts lay an unsettling realization. The enemy wasn't merely external. Someone close to Xylora had betrayed her trust, and until they uncovered the traitor, no one was safe, including Rylan. Days blurred into weeks, the palace gripped by an undercurrent of paranoia. Whispers echoed through marble corridors, servants avoided eye contact, and even trusted allies questioned motives. Xylora moved through it all like a specter, her radiant presence dimmed by the shadows of doubt. Yet amid the turmoil, she clung to one constant: Rylan. Together, they devised a risky plan, a decoy operation designed to flush out the mole. Under the guise of relocating critical research files to a secure offsite facility, Xylora announced her intention to personally oversee the transfer. News spread quickly, reaching every corner of the palace and beyond. Unknown to most, however, the files were fake, planted with deliberate flaws to draw attention. Meanwhile, Rylan coordinated with a select group of loyalists to monitor internal communications, hoping to intercept any leaks. Tension mounted as the day of the operation arrived. Dressed in civilian attire to avoid drawing suspicion, Xylora boarded a sleek transport vessel accompanied by Rylan and a skeleton crew of hand-picked guards. As the ship ascended into the star-speckled sky, she couldn't shake the nagging sensation that they were walking into a trap. Beside her, Rylan maintained a stoic facade, though his knuckles whitened as he gripped the armrest. Hours later, their fears proved justified. Mid-flight, alarms blared as unidentified vessels appeared on the horizon, closing in fast. Pirates, or so they claimed, broadcasting demands for surrender. But Xylora saw through the ruse immediately. These weren't opportunistic raiders. Their maneuvers were too precise, their timing too perfect. "Hold position," she instructed the pilot, her voice calm despite the storm raging inside. Turning to Rylan, she added, "Get ready." He nodded, slipping into combat mode with practiced ease. Within moments, the ship rocked violently as enemy fire struck its shields. Sparks flew from control panels, and smoke filled the cabin. Chaos erupted as the foe crew scrambled to defend themselves, but Xylora remained focused, her mind racing through contingencies. Suddenly, a transmission crackled through the comm system. A familiar voice, Commander Lyravance, filled the airwaves. "Princess Xylora, you disappoint me. Did you really think your little charade would fool us?" Xylora clenched her fists, resisting the urge to lash out verbally. Instead, she activated a hidden protocol, triggering a fail-safe mechanism embedded in the ship systems. Instantly, holographic displays flickered to life, revealing real-time data streams intercepted from the attacker's comms. Among the chatter, one name stood out: Advisor Kalon, a senior member of Xylora's council. Rylan caught sight of the name and cursed under his breath. "Kalon? Are you sure? There's no mistaking it," Xylora replied, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and betrayal. "He's been feeding them information all along." Before they could process the implications, the ship lurched again, this time more violently. Shields failed, and hull integrity warnings flashed across the cockpit. Desperation set in as the enemy closed in, boarding parties breaching the outer compartments. Rylan grabbed Xylora's arm, pulling her toward an escape pod. "We need to get you out of here," he urged, his tone urgent. "And leave my people to die?" she snapped, jerking free of his grasp. "I won't abandon them. This isn't about abandoning them. It's about surviving to fight another day." Rylan countered, his frustration evident. "You're no use to anyone dead." Their argument was cut short as a blast tore through the corridor, sending debris flying. Shielding Xylora with his body, Rylan pushed her into the pod, sealing the hatch behind them just as another explosion rocked the ship. The pod ejected violently, hurtling them into the void of space. As they drifted away from the battle, Xylora stared back at the burning wreckage, tears streaming down her face. Betrayal burned hotter than the flames consuming her ship. Yet even in despair, a spark of defiance ignited within her. Kalon would pay for his treachery, and so would those who orchestrated this nightmare. Beside her, Rylan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll make them regret this," he vowed, his voice unwavering. Together, through the viewport, stars stretched endlessly, indifferent to the drama unfolding below. But somewhere among those distant constellations lay hope and vengeance. The escape pod hurtled silently through the vastness of space, its trajectory carrying Xylora and Rylan farther from the wreckage of their ship with each passing second. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with grief and resolve. Xylora sat hunched over, her hands trembling as she replayed the events in her mind. The betrayal, the ambush, the loss of lives entrusted to her care. Her shimmering gown was singed at the edges, a grim reminder of how close they had come to death. Rylan, ever vigilant, monitored the pod systems while keeping one eye on the rear viewport for signs of pursuit. So far, they seemed to have evaded immediate danger, but he knew better than to let his guard down. "We need a plan," he said finally, breaking the oppressive silence. His voice was steady, though exhaustion etched lines around his eyes. Xylora looked up, her violet gaze sharp despite the tears that still clung to her lashes. "Yes, and it starts with Kalon." Her tone left no room for argument. The betrayal cut deeper than any blade. Not only had Kalon been among her most trusted advisors, but he had also served her family for decades. To discover his treachery felt like a personal violation, a fracture in the very foundation of her reign. But anger wouldn't solve anything, not yet. First, they needed answers. "We can't confront him directly," Rylan cautioned, leaning forward to emphasize his point. "If we do, we risk tipping off whoever's pulling his strings. We need evidence, proof we can use against him without giving ourselves away." Xylora nodded slowly, her mind already racing through possibilities. "There's a secure archive beneath the palace. It contains records of all council communications, encrypted and accessible only by me. If Kalon has been communicating with our enemies, those messages will be there. But getting back to the palace won't be easy," Rylan pointed out. "They'll be watching for us now, especially after what happened." A small, determined smile tugged at Xylora's lips. "Then we'll have to make sure they don't see us coming." Their journey back to Valeth was fraught with peril. Using the limited resources aboard the escape pod, Rylan managed to reroute their course toward an uncharted asteroid field near the planet's orbit. From there, they hitched a ride on a cargo freighter manned by sympathetic traders who owed allegiance to Xylora's lineage. Disguised as common laborers, they slipped past security checkpoints undetected, blending into the bustling corridors of the royal palace under cover of night. Once inside, Xylora led Rylan through hidden passageways known only to members of the royal family. These ancient tunnels, carved centuries ago during times of war, allowed them to move unseen beneath the palace's opulent halls. Their destination, the subterranean archive chamber, guarded by layers of biometric locks and energy barriers designed to repel intruders. As Xylora placed her palm on the final scanner, granting them access, Rylan couldn't help but marvel at her composure. Despite everything she'd endured, she carried herself with the same regal grace that first captivated him. Yet now he saw something more beneath the surface, a steely determination that made her even more formidable. Inside the archive, holographic displays flickered to life, illuminating the dim chamber with streams of data. Xylora wasted no time, navigating through encrypted files until she found what they were looking for. A series of covert transmissions between Kalon and an unknown recipient. Each message hinted at a larger conspiracy, one involving not just Commander Lyra Vance but also shadowy figures within Earth's interstellar factions. "They've been planning this for years," Xylora murmured, her voice tinged with disbelief, "using my research as leverage to destabilize alliances across the galaxy. They want chaos, and they're willing to sacrifice entire worlds to achieve it." Rylan clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. "Then we stop them. But we'll need allies. People we can trust completely." Xylora turned to him, her expression resolute. "We start with General Thaler. He commands the Royal Guard and has served my family since before I was born. If anyone can rally support discreetly, it's him." With newfound purpose, they left the archives and made their way to the General's private quarters. What followed was a tense but ultimately hopeful conversation. General Thaler listened intently as Xylora laid out the evidence, his weathered face growing darker with each revelation. When she finished, he rose to his feet, his loyalty unwavering. "My queen," he said firmly, placing a fist over his heart. "You have my sword and my silence. What is your command?" Together, they devised a strategy. Under the guise of routine inspections, the Royal Guard began isolating key sections of the palace, quietly detaining suspected collaborators without alerting Kalon or his co-conspirators. Meanwhile, Xylora announced her intention to hold an emergency summit with Earth's representatives, citing concerns over recent border skirmishes. The invitation extended to Commander Lyra Vance, whose presence would serve as both bait and confirmation of their suspicions. The day of the summit arrived, and tension crackled in the air like static electricity. Delegates from various human colonies filled the grand hall, their expressions ranging from curiosity to thinly veiled hostility. Among them stood Commander Lyra Vance, her cold green eyes scanning the room with calculated precision. Beside her, Kalon maintained a facade of calm, though his fingers twitched nervously at his side. Xylora entered the chamber flanked by Rylan and General Thaler, her bearing regal yet approachable. As she took her place at the head of the table, she addressed the assembly with measured words, speaking of unity and shared goals. But beneath the diplomatic rhetoric lay a carefully woven trap. "Before we proceed," she announced, gesturing to a nearby console, "I'd like to share some findings that may shed light on recent disturbances." With a press of a button, holographic projections filled the room, displaying intercepted transmissions and damning evidence of collusion between Kalon, Vance, and their mysterious benefactors. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the truth came to light. Kalon paled visibly, his knees buckling as guards moved in to restrain him. Vance, however, remained eerily composed, her lips curling into a smug smile. "You think this changes anything?" she sneered, stepping forward defiantly. "Your precious alliance is already fractured. By the time news of this reaches Earth, your so-called unity will crumble." "It won't come to that," Xylora replied, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Because you've underestimated us. You assumed we'd act alone, that fear would paralyze us. But you forgot one thing: humanity isn't defined by its divisions. It's defined by its resilience, and its capacity to rise above hatred." Her words resonated throughout the chamber, silencing dissent and rallying support. Even some of Vance's own followers hesitated, their resolve shaken by the weight of her conviction. As the conspirators were taken into custody, Rylan stepped closer to Xylora, his expression softening. "You did it," he said simply, pride evident in his tone. She shook her head, meeting his gaze with a bittersweet smile. "No, we did it. Together." In the days that followed, peace talks resumed with renewed vigor, bolstered by the exposure of the conspiracy. Though scars remained, hope began to take root once more. And as Xylora stood beside Rylan, gazing out at the stars beyond her palace windows, she realized something profound. Their bond had transcended duty and survival. It had become something far greater. For the first time in what felt like forever, the future seemed bright. In the months that followed, Xylora and Rylan grew closer than ever, their partnership evolving into something neither had anticipated, but both cherished deeply. The trials they endured together forged a bond stronger than any royal decree or military alliance. A connection rooted in trust, respect, and love. As peace stabilized across Valeth and its neighboring systems, whispers of celebration began to ripple through the palace corridors. One evening, beneath the shimmering glow of twin moons casting light over the floating palace, Rylan found Xylora in the gardens, where they'd shared so many quiet moments. She stood near the luminous pond, her reflection dancing on its surface. He approached hesitantly, holding something small in his hand. "Xylora," he began, his voice soft yet steady. "You've given me more than I ever thought possible. A purpose, a home, and someone who truly understands me." Kneeling before her, he opened the small box to reveal a simple yet elegant ring crafted from stardust-infused metal. "Will you marry me? Not because it's expected, but because my life feels incomplete without you." Tears welled in Xylora's eyes as she gazed at him, her heart swelling with emotion. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with joy. 1,000 times yes. Their wedding ceremony was a grand affair, blending traditions from Earth and Valeth in a celebration that united two worlds. The palace halls were adorned with glowing flora from Valeth and golden banners reminiscent of Earth's harvest festivals. Delegates from countless star systems attended, their presence a testament to the unity Xylora and Rylan had fought so hard to achieve. Dressed in a gown that shimmered like the cosmos itself, Xylora walked down the aisle toward Rylan, who stood tall in ceremonial attire, his eyes never leaving hers. As they exchanged vows under the watchful gaze of their friends, family, and allies, the air seemed to hum with magic. They promised not only devotion to each other but also a shared commitment to protect and nurture the fragile harmony they had rebuilt. When the officiant declared them bound for life, cheers erupted throughout the hall, echoing into the vastness of space. Years passed, and their union flourished. Xylora ruled with wisdom and compassion, while Rylan served as her steadfast advisor and protector. Together, they welcomed twins, a boy named Eric, whose laughter echoed through the palace, and a girl named Lyra, whose curiosity about the stars mirrored her mother's. Their children became bridges between cultures, embodying the hope of a brighter future. Life wasn't without challenges, but Xylora and Rylan faced them side by side, drawing strength from their love and the legacy they built together. On quiet nights, they would sit on the balcony overlooking the endless expanse of stars, watching their children play among the gardens. "I never imagined I'd find happiness like this," Xylora admitted one evening, resting her head on Rylan's shoulder. "Neither did I," he replied, kissing her temple gently. "But I wouldn't trade it for anything." Surrounded by family, laughter, and the beauty of the universe, they lived out their days knowing they had created something extraordinary. Not just a kingdom, but a home filled with love that spanned galaxies. And as long as the stars continued to shine, their story would endure, a beacon of hope for all who dared to dream of unity amidst diversity.